Hello, everybody, and welcome to WASD 20. This is the very first Dungeon Master Roundtable. Thank you guys so much for joining us, and we have some really cool DMs in the house tonight, some great people, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and then we will get into the topic for tonight, which is running your first game, just sharing tips for brand new, very new, maybe aspiring Dungeon Masters. So thank you all for being here. We'll start with Dave from Nerdarchy. Dave, tell us a little about yourself and where people can find you.
Okay. Hey, folks, I run a little channel called Nerdarchy, and we have videos and a website and all kinds of stuff going on over there. And we just talk about RPGs and D&D all the time. And I hope I can be helpful on this topic because it's been so long since I ran my first game. It might be like Sydney's lifetime over a couple times.
Hey, that's fair.
Probably.
You know
Like
what?
it's not even a joke.
Yeah. Well, your videos are your credentials, Dave. You're a good teacher and have a lot of wisdom. So,
Well, thank you.
and Jim.
Hey everybody out there. I am, of course, the co-host of WebDM, another channel over here on YouTube, and I love talking about Dungeons and Dragons and somehow have lucked my way into getting paid for it. So there you go.
Pretty awesome. Yep. And lastly, Sydney.
Hi, I'm Sydney. I do a lot of things in a lot of different places. Mainly, you can find me on Encounter Roleplay. I am on both the podcast over there, Turncloaks, and I am the Dungeon Master for WonderQuest podcast. And I play D&D every Saturday on the D&D channel on Twitch. So I play a lot of games all the time.
Yeah. I mean, I was looking you up, and you have a lot of places people can find you. So
Yeah.
I put the links to one of the places that they can find you down in the description below for each of you. So check out the links for Encounter Roleplay on Twitch, Nerdarchy and WebDM on YouTube down in the video description, and go subscribe to their stuff and check them out. Well, yeah, thank you guys again for joining me here as we're going to be just talking about what it's like to run a first Dungeons and Dragons session, or another tabletop RPG for that matter. I wanted to start by, and this is the part that Dave was mentioning would be perhaps a bit of a challenge for him. I want to start by actually hearing from you all. What was your first time running D&D, and maybe like a lesson from that, something that you realize like, I did this wrong, or this went well, or something like that. And maybe I'll start us off. I'll be the brave one who airs my dirty laundry here and tells everyone what a terrible DM I was the first time. My first time was running the Pathfinder beginner box. And this was just about 4 years ago now. So it's still pretty fresh for me. But it was the Pathfinder beginner box. I had played in, I think, 2 Pathfinder Society games at my local game shop before this, so I had a little bit of experience, but sat down with Pathfinder Beginner Box and some friends who were totally new, some of whom had very little interest in tabletop RPGs or fantasy at all, and it was a blast. It was so much fun. I think most of them had fun, and I certainly did. And but the one lesson that I learned from this, the mistake that I always just go, was that I basically shut down some of the things the players were trying to do in terms of being creative, because I didn't know how to handle them. And I just said, can you maybe just pick one of the attacks on your character sheet instead? Instead of these awesome creative things they were trying to do, like negotiate with people and lasso these goblins. I'm like, I don't know how the rules handle that. There's no lasso section in the rules here. Right? So I think that was probably my biggest takeaway, is like, man, there's always a way to do something. Otherwise, it's not a tabletop RPG. You can always find a way for them to do what they want to do. And a lot of times, like in D&D, it's just making that skill check or that ability check. So anyway, let's go next to Sydney. Tell us about your first time GMing a game and a lesson.
Okay. So this this story is just the dumbest thing ever. The first time I ever ran a game, my friends came over to my house and it was like our regular gaming group, and our DM didn't show up. And so we were like really all just like super pissed off at my house. And my mom had made spaghetti for dinner. That's crucial because then I'd never ever DM'd before, and I was like, all right, everybody sit down. I'm going to do this. And I sat there 5 minutes with a Google document, and I wrote a whole new world. It was called Spaghetti, and it was a world that had a lot of Italian restaurants and a lot of goats everywhere. And that was crucial to the plot. Everybody rode goats, had pet goats, and everybody had something to do with goats. It made absolutely no sense. It was complete bullshit and thrown together. Not a great game. I would not recommend you look for this campaign setting because it's not out there. It was not good. But it was still like fun though. I like, even though it was just total bullcrap and nobody knew what was going on, it was still really funny. So I guess a lesson from that is I try to keep that sort of spontaneity there where you just throw some stuff out and have a really good time. It doesn't have to be super serious. It doesn't have to all make sense. As long as you're having a good time, you're doing it right. Even if it is in a world full of goats and Italian restaurants, as long as people have fun, it's okay.
Spaghetti. I'm writing it down.
Write it down. Never forget it.
Awesome. Jim, how about you?
Gosh, I ran my first D&D session after I'd spent about 5 or 6 years running other games. So my first D&D session was a bit different. I had an idea of what you're supposed to do as a DM, but I didn't really know the system, and so it was a lot of winging it. This was back in the days of THAC0, so it was a lot of like, sure, that attack hits kind of business. My first game was sometime pre-teen, 10, maybe 11, for my brother. And it was a lot of just, I was big into the Sierra adventure games at the time. It was like, oh, this is like, I'll just steal from Quest for Glory or King's Quest or one of the other big ones that was out. I don't remember much about it at all, to be honest. I just remember it was a lot of me taking things that inspired me at the time, whether it was video games or comic books or the things I still do in my spare time, and using them to run something for my brother and his friends at a slumber party. So it was like me, a 10-year-old, trying to run games for a bunch of 7 and 8-year-olds, which was a special kind of experience.
Yeah, as an adult who runs games for 7 and 8-year-olds, I can't imagine.
There was a lot of arguing and yelling, and there was probably a fist fight at some point as well. So, yeah. I've learned a lot since then as an individual, I hope.
Yeah.
You throw the first punch now, get the second punch in.
Yeah. I don't let anybody throw the first punch anymore. I'm always in there right at the beginning. Yeah. I'll take it.
And it's always 10-year-olds.
It's always 10-year-olds as well, right?
Like, over the first. It's like hockey.
Oh, man.
It's the guy that punches back that always gets in trouble. So it's never me.
Dave, we'll go to you in a sec. In the chat, just thanks all for joining in, and I do hope to get to some viewer questions sometime toward the end. So just keep that in mind. I will throw that out there. And Dave, how about you?
Well, I can tell you one thing. I wasn't opening up my Google Docs. That's for sure. What about you, Div? Did that play much into your first game?
It doesn't now. I've always been an analog guy. Give me a pen and paper, and I'm much happier than a keyboard and a screen.
Google Docs didn't exist when we started playing.
Right, shade me, dude. Just
you know
shade
what?
me.
It's funny though, because like Jim said, it's like hard to remember playing those games. And I started as a tween, and I remember our first couple years of playing, especially in the summertime. We would play all kinds of games, and it wasn't just D&D, but that was like the starter. And we started with AD&D first edition, but I think the first time I probably ran a game was probably the basic, the red box, and like in Chris Heckler's bedroom, like during sleepovers, like staying up until like all night, running games. And I couldn't tell you what happened other than we would completely just butcher the rules. And the other thing is, like, you didn't play the game the same way, when we first started. It was a lot of like, it wasn't, really wasn't about story as much as it was about, just kind of like, it was like a board game that took place in your imagination, the way we played it. There wasn't, we didn't use minis pretty much. It didn't matter, like, like Nate asked, what did you get wrong? What did you take away from it? It didn't matter because we all were getting it wrong and we were all playing the same game. So but nobody knew any better, so it didn't matter. It's not like today where you can just go online and be like, oh, I'm just going to watch a stream of D&D and be like, oh, I've been doing this rule wrong, or they do it differently. Everyone kind of learned the D&D in their own like microcosm at the time.
Yeah.
So, so you may have like had takeaways that was fun for your group, but it was very like group specific.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've heard stories of Gary Gygax taking phone calls at the house constantly, like answering people's questions about how the heck do you play this game? Like.
Damn it, we only had his number. We could have solved so many debates.
Yeah. Oh man. All right. Well, good stuff. Well, thank you for all airing your dirty laundry there, and yeah, some learning experiences, and I do want to, I guess, drive that point across that it's okay that like it's not gonna go as well your first time as you would like it to, and you will look back and it's gonna be a little rocky, and it's gonna be a valuable learning experience. So
DMs
you just can't take it too seriously. Like, you just do some random stuff. Don't take it seriously. No one knows what they're doing.
I would say we had it easy. Right? When we were playing, we had it easy because no one could go and see that you were doing it wrong. You had to figure it out. And like, if you look at first edition, like trying to figure that shit out, it's like hieroglyphics and stuff, all kinds of tables. Nobody knew what they were doing. But now it's like, you play the game, you go online and be like, oh, my DM's full of shit. I've seen Matt Mercer do it. My DM's doing it wrong.
Yeah. I mean, right. That's I think maybe the danger of watching too much of that stuff is like, oh, I could never do that. But yeah, just we all have different starting points, and if you're having fun, you're doing it right. So, we stumble our way through, and I, we're always learning, always improving, maybe.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Who cares? As long as we're having fun.
That's right. We're hanging with our friends, and we're telling stories.
Like, you can't be one of those people that like you can't tell yourself that you can't, because then you won't. Like, right. And but you're never gonna be like this person to this person, because let's get really cliche for a second. You're you, and you're unique. And so like, I've had like a ton of great DMs that are all like so different, and I go to them for different things. Some they make me cry a lot. Some make me laugh a lot, and some let me kill a bunch of things. It's all different. It's all good. It's all D&D. It doesn't really matter. Just, I don't know, play your games.
No, Sid's right on this one. It's like running a game and playing D&D is so idiosyncratic, so individual, that like it's gonna take a while if you're a new DM to figure out what your DM style is and what methods you want to use, and whether you're an NPC DM who like really gets into the characters that they present and like really gets into the role playing part of it, or whether you're like a tactical DM that likes the battles and the setup, and you need to learn more about what you like about the game. And it's all individual, and eventually you have this big toolbox of stuff you can do if you just keep at it, and you're like, oh, I'll just take from this today, or I'm going to do like this kind of session. I want an RP heavy session today, or this time I want action packed session, or both, because there's not they're not mutually exclusive. But yeah, it's very individual.
Yep, absolutely. So I'm wondering if you guys could comment, anyone, what should the brand new DM, the aspiring DM, know or do? I mean, what goes into it before the game? What are some considerations, some things to think about before you even sit down at the table?
Who do you want to play with? This is huge, believe it or not. Like, people will they will send us questions and ask all these questions, and immediately what jumps to my mind isn't the solution or the answer to the problem or the question is, but it's who the hell are you playing the game with? Like, when we've always sat down with people that are our friends, and and if even if it's someone I'm not familiar with, I don't know, like an invitation to my table is an invitation of friendship, essentially. So I find I find some of the questions we get to be really odd, where it seems like they're really just struggling to interact with other humans, or they're like playing with like random people. I mean, I guess that's really possible if you're playing in a game store or like a forum for like Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds or something like that. But at the end of the day, like the biggest thing I think that matters for gaming is people, not the game itself, not the mechanics, not the story. It's the people that you're interacting with and hopefully building relationships with.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, no, that's well said. Yep. Any other thoughts on things a DM should keep in mind before getting to the table for the first time?
The way I usually go about like starting to write a campaign or starting to write a one-shot or starting to write anything is I guess based on the way I feel I guess satisfied as a DM, like at the end of a session, the way I feel like, okay, I feel like that was good, I'm happy with how that went, and I feel really good. What gives me that feeling is like my players having really good reactions to it, and the way I get that is what I really like is when they give me a really in-depth backstory and I build everything off of that, because then that the whole story is going to have them super involved. They're never going to be bored because it's all about their characters. Like, it's all connected to them. It means something to them. They're emotionally invested in it. They want to further their character, and you've written this whole story based on what they gave you, so they're going to like it. And that makes me feel a lot more comfortable, like knowing it's what they want.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I was going to mention is just, the best thing you could do if you had one thing is just to talk to talk to the players, talk to the people you're going to be sitting down with, and what are they excited about? Why do they like playing? What interest, what about your setting are they really interested in that you can emphasize? What parts of it do they want to fill in the gaps for? There's a lot of ways you can go with it, but it starts with just like sitting down with your other players and being like, hey, even if it's like everybody's first time, just be like, what are y'all looking forward to? It gives you an idea of expectations for them.
Yeah, and even like what video games or movies do you enjoy can be huge. Like I had a player who, when we got to town, he was thinking it was going to be, all right, it's time to upgrade, and it's time to get all this equipment and play inventory Tetris and all this stuff, Diablo style, and it's just like, oh, okay, well, that's not the way I play D&D at all. But what can I do now that can kind of get that for him, and I can accommodate some of that for sure. So that stuff is really helpful to talk about.
Yeah, I think that's a great approach to it. I'm currently writing a campaign that my best friend is going to play, and she won't play. She has never been interested in D&D. Like, she has actually voiced hatred for this game. Like, she does not get it. She hates it, just burning passion, does not like this game. And eventually, like, I wore her down every day. I was like, please let me just, come on. And so the other day she texted me and she was like, all right, I will play it. I will play it one time. And I was like, okay. And like asked her to give me all of her favorite TV shows, all of her favorite like movie characters, her favorite books. And I was like, let me find some running themes in here. What do you like? You like mystery, you like interrogation, you like this kind of thing. That's what we're gonna do, and you're gonna love this game. So I think that's really important.
It's so hard. Like, people ask, how do I get someone to switch from this system to that system? I'm like, why? But why do you want them to? Does it matter? Or I don't know. I don't try and drag the horse to water.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Eventually, hey, just start. You want to play that system? Get another group.
Yes.
You can't have too much gaming. Yeah, you can. Okay, fine.
You presumably have to eat and sleep sometime.
Yeah.
You can do some of that at the table.
That's true. Very
we were
true.
talking about these little humans that rely on us a little bit too before going live tonight, and I guess there's something there. But
there's something there. There is life outside the table.
It's true. Kids will wreck your gaming life. I think we were talking about that.
Yeah, they will.
Noted.
Yes.
Noted.
No. Yeah. Take notes.
I can still save myself.
Yeah, you can. Just remember, Sydney, first the kids will wreck your body, and then they will wreck your life.
although
Life
I will
advice.
say,
Advice from Nerdarchy.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dave.
I've got
No
little
problem.
dungeon delvers ready to go
My
at a
wife
moment's
is like,
notice.
my cousin is
so-
going on cruises all the time. How come we don't do that? I'm like, because you wanted to have kids.
There you go.
That's why.
That's
Just
it.
remember, they can be
Dave's
little
bitter.
gamers too, though, guys.
I'm bitter about this.
All right. So, module or homebrew? What would you guys tend to suggest most of the time for a new DM?
I mean, there's a lot satisfying about homebrew. You know, there's a lot you can just pour your heart and soul into a setting and get a lot of feedback. But if you don't have a lot of time, or you don't have, you want a clear example of like what it should look like, then leaning on a module, running it as is a perfectly fun way to play. But I think it's one of those things where I think you'll know if DMing's for you if you're like, I've got to make up my own stuff. Like that's kind of where I land on it.
Yeah, and there are players who run modules for years, and that's all they do, and they love it too. But if you've got that world building, that storytelling itch, then you really know.
Yeah.
It kind of depends, like what the experience is for the person coming into GMing. How much playing have they done of the game? Someone who's done a lot more playing is going to find it easier to transition into the GM role, as opposed to someone who's just coming to the game for the first time. Like they might be better off getting a module and seeing how it's structured. And I mean, oftentimes at Nerdarchy, we pretty much improv everything. We don't really do a lot of prep work. We like write down a couple words or sentences or whatever, and then go with it. And for a new player, that would be probably that would be difficult to do. We have years of experience, so we kind of have figured this stuff out. We can pick monsters out of our brain, and we know what the stats kind of should be or where to go. So it's a lot easier. One of the reasons why I don't like pre-written adventures and I don't like modules is because I'm lazy. Honestly, I think it's more work for me to read one and prepare that material than it is for me to just make up something, So, but for a new GM, and I've seen new GMs improv and be just fine with it. And sometimes it's just like the personality of the person running the game, and what kind of group you have, right? If you have a lot of interactive players, then as the GM, you tend to not do as much. Like look at Critical Role. It's a great example of how much time does Matt just sit there, right? He doesn't do anything. He just watches his players go. It's like you wind them up and let them out there and they do their thing. And then every once in a while you'll have to interact or whatever, or they'll go in a direction and you have to provide the feedback. But it comes down to several things. Like I said, it's the table and the experience of the player and comfort level.
Yeah. I mean, I pretty much agree. It does vary. Like, I can't tell you which one you should do. I love homebrew. I've pretty much always done homebrew. Like, I have like dipped a toe into like Tomb of Annihilation and stuff, but I pulled my toe right back out. I like homebrew, and that's what I like to do. I really like it. I have a lot of fun with it, especially just because I also like love world building. Like I do it in my spare time, and I do it with my girlfriends whenever we have wine Wednesdays. That's what we do. Like that's just our thing. Like a week ago, me and my friend Amy literally had a 3-hour conversation about the different types of rocks in my homebrew world. The different types of rocks. So like that's just what it is important. It is important, Dave. You don't realize how important it is until you have a 3-hour conversation over a bottle of Moscato. It's important.
All right, I believe you. What makes it important?
Because Jim.
Do you need more Moscato to get to the
Yes, I do actually.
One moment.
Like the different types of geology and things can dictate the different types of structures, and then what sort of creatures can get up there. How easy is it if for your players to climb up this mountain? What kind of rock is it made out of? Can they like do a grappling hook, or is it too soft? Can they climb it? Can they not? Can they build something on top of it? Could an entire city be founded on this type of landmass, or is it too soft? Is it too hard? Is it volcanic? You don't know. You got to plan it.
fault lines, all that stuff.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. That's
on Wine Wednesday. That's what we do it.
I've spent I've had those conversations before. They sometimes produce great things, and I think it brings up like a great point is that every DM out there who gets into it has someone that they can bounce ideas off of, talk to, and preferably not one of your players, right? So you're not spoiling them, but just like someone else who loves the game. Or loves some part of it that you can chat with is a good asset to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Yeah, for me, I was one of those GMs who just could not imagine homebrewing something my first time. It was just like, no. I mean, and I've played, decades of computer role-playing games, and I still was just like, when it comes to tabletop, was too freaked out and felt clueless and ill-equipped. So I ended up running the beginner box, which is one adventure, and then I ended up buying Rise of the Rune Lords, this huge like tome, and it was just like, and it is work. I think new DMs need to know that, like, that is work, that is homework, reading twice through, and it's dense and
making notes and
Yep. So it was work, but I still feel like for me it was the right move. I kind of feel like I had to do it. But yeah, like you guys say, everyone's different. You can see those new DMs who are winging it and just you're a natural. This is awesome. So, yeah.
Well, you can always start off by running something, and then once you feel more comfortable, you can sort of derail it to what you want it to be. So you could do like half of Tomb of Annihilation, and then things start going a little bit different, and maybe you don't want to go with the ending that's in the book. Maybe you want to go in another direction, and then you want to do more of a homebrew adventure, not a homebrew world necessarily, but you want to take it in a different direction. You can do that. You don't have to stick to it. The police are not going to come after you. Just throw the book away and do something else.
Yeah, and your players might never know.
Your players will never know.
They won't be able to tell where you went off script. I mean, it's just
Well, unless they've read it and they own it, there's always that.
There's always occasionally.
You have to kill them. Then you just have to kill them.
In which case, you better go off script really soon. Yeah. Cool. So I did have a question on Facebook the other day. Someone asked, who was this? Actually, it was Hero of Time, who I think is in the chat today. I saw him earlier.
He is in the chat.
Any cool campaigns I could look up for level 1 to 4 characters? Speaking of campaigns. Yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you know of any? I know that there are like free modules out there that I've been meaning to do research on because I have people ask me all the time, and it's like I think there are free or pay what you want modules out there or adventures that you can just do it. But I don't know.
Yeah, there's tons on the DM's Guild.
Okay,
there's tons on that. There's a ton of like one-page dungeons that are out there that's like everything you need literally on one page. Although a lot of them are for different versions of D&D, so you'd have to do some work to convert them. I'm not sure. To be perfectly honest, there's a blog that I visit whenever I want to read a review. It's called 10-Foot Pole, and I think it's .org, and it's like all kinds of modules, 5th edition, old school stuff, and it's just like a lot of the times you can buy a module, you don't even have to run the rule set from it. So like you can buy a Call of Cthulhu module if you want to run something like with horror in it, take some inspiration from that, build something for it, or buy the opening chapters to Princes of the Apocalypse, which is like a mini sandbox, and like adapt that to your campaign world. That's, I don't know, it's kind of an all over the place sort of answer though.
That's great. Yeah.
Like we've kickstarted 2 adventures in the past. The first one was Breath of Gore, which is it's kind of everything you need to play the game, kind of like a starter set, but at a little bit higher level. But the character sheets are something that we made that are like super simplified, so it's really good for people that haven't played before. like it comes with all the NPCs, it comes with all the artwork, it comes with all the character sheets, it comes with all that. You can find that on our website if you want to check that out. It's got orcs, it's got vampires, it's got boats and water and things. And we just kickstarted another one called the Blood Plague, which is like super dark, super sad, scary, like low magic, low fantasy, evil D&D, which if you want to try something very different, maybe check that one out too.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm just looking it up here, and yeah, that's good to know. So yeah, people go check out Breath of Gore, and what was the other one, Sid?
The Blood Plague.
The Blood
The happy, cheery Blood Plague.
I don't know how much of Will took from the Breath of Gore when he did the stream. What did he do? Like a 24-hour stream for marathon stream for the Kickstarter. But I know it was a lot of fun to play.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's a fun time.
So question about once you get to the table, at least for me, I found it to be a little bit overwhelming, just kind of managing all the pieces. So what tips or tools would you recommend to new DMs? Things to keep in mind just for keeping track of everything. You got initiative, you got hit points, you got NPCs and who has what voice, or if you're doing that, and it can be a lot.
There are a ton of free resources you can download for that kind of stuff that, if you just do a Google. And that's like what's the fun thing about like D&D now as opposed to when we were doing it. It's like, it was the Wild Wild West. Now it's like every tool you want is there. But pretty much it's just, for me, for management, I would say is just keep it as simple as possible. Don't be afraid to ask your players to give you a hand. Like if you want to have someone track initiative for you, or something like that, or someone is in charge of moving minis, or whatever it is that helps organize things. Someone takes notes and kind of chronicles things, so that you can get detailed notes that you don't have to take them all, and also getting the other perspective is nice as well. Sometimes we have a player do that. Someone that keeps track of the treasure and things like that is useful. And these are all jobs that the players can do. I used to track things like hit points for my players, but I gave that up a while.
No.
I'm like, no. Just I'll tell you the damage. Tell me when you're dead.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah. You guys didn't do the scratch paper. So and so took X amount.
No, I've never done that. I have had DMs who wanted to keep track of everything for me and like not even let you have your character sheet because they're like,
no, it wasn't like that.
Yeah,
I guess I don't know. I guess and that might just come back to like the way we learn to play, right? If your DM did a certain thing there and you like that DM, there's a good possibility you'll do the same thing.
Your players are a resource, and they can look up rules, they can keep track of initiative, they can take control of an NPC during a fight so that you don't have to worry about it. Ask them, particularly if like everybody's learning the game at once, it can be helpful to have someone be like the spell looker upper, right? And like no matter what, they look up a spell, even if it's someone else casting the spell, they got it on deck just in case you need the rules or something. Just to get everybody used to the game and playing. But I would also say to start small. If you're a new DM out there now, in some ways, learning how to DM for me in the 90s was like, there's nothing else out there. I have to just think it up myself, and there's no one else telling me I should be doing this, I should be doing that. Whereas now I feel like if you were a new DM, you can hit up YouTube and Twitch and all the blogs and all the Reddit and whatever else you're finding, Facebook, those 100,000 people in a Facebook group arguing with each other, and like you might get too much information. So keep it simple. If it seems like too much, if when you're prepping and preparing for the game, you're like, this seems like a lot to keep track of, maybe it is. And maybe you just introduce those elements slowly over time, as opposed to jumping in the deep end, unless you're a deep end kind of person, in which case go for it and see what works. The beauty of this game is you can be like really bad at it and get better and it's okay. Like, particularly if you're with friends, the barrier, or sorry, the bar for an enjoyable time is really low. You know, if everybody's there to have a good time and spend time with each other and learn something, then it's okay to mess up. It's okay to not get it right, immediately. And like, you're going to put a lot of pressure on yourself. So, it's okay. You'll be all right. You'll get it eventually.
Yeah.
Breathe.
Definitely.
Breathe.
I mean, like, I think, like, piggybacking off of that, a good policy that I have, because like right now I'm running my first really long-term campaign. Like I've done like a bunch of like little one-shots here and there and short, like, 3-4 month long one, but this one is, coming up on a year that we're doing now. And I am really transparent with my players because I still consider myself fairly new. I haven't been doing it a super long time. I'm like, I was basically like born yesterday. I don't know what I'm doing. So like, if I don't know what I'm doing or if I need to look something up, I'm just like, okay, everybody, like, you can go to the bathroom or something. I need to Google this. I don't know what it is. Like nobody's gonna be mad at you or like judge you for that. Like, and a lot of times I'll even go so far as to like, one of my players is a really, really experienced GM and she is amazing. And so there'll be times where I just don't know what to do. And I'm like, do you think that this would be one of these? And she's like, yes, I think it would be one of those. And I'm like, sweet, that's what we're doing. It's one of those. Like that you don't have to think of yourself as up here and they're like on another level and you can't level with them and be honest. Like you can be transparent and be like, I really don't know what to do. I'm just gonna either Google it or I don't know, make something up. Sorry. And then keep going. Like you're not shattering this grand illusion. It's a game. Everything's fine.
Yeah. It's a game where you pretend to be elves and fight dragons. It's not
that serious.
Right. It really isn't, and should be a little goofy and silly because I think it's best played with a tongue firmly in cheek.
I think the funny part is I'm figuring out what mistakes I used to make by being on this round table. And I'm like, what? Oh, no one else did that? I guess that was a mistake.
Dave, this is actually an intervention. We've invited you here today.
Dave, we all brought you here.
Yeah.
Surprise, sucker.
I think for me, like, it was ridiculous. I was looking through one of my old notebooks the other day, kind of cleaning up, and I found this sheet of, it was like 1 through 23 or something like that, blanks, all numbered. And then I had like skeleton written on like 9, and then like skeleton 2 written on like 14. And I was just like, it took me a minute. This was my initiative tracker that I had prepared like before the game. And it was just like, man, I put way too much pressure on myself to, and it was just one of those things that I look back on like, hey, that method could work for someone suggested that. And I thank them for trying to help someone who was like, help, how do I do this? 'Cause it's hard. But like, I just needed to get used to it. And now I just got a scrap of paper. I usually don't even prepare, and I just rip off a napkin or whatever, right? And I'm just like writing down hit points and initiative, and it works out fine.
Yeah. It'll work out. It'll be fine. You'll be all right.
Yeah.
Dice will be rolled, snacks consumed. We're all right.
Yeah.
You all live. Like one time, this is just like I think this is a funny story. We were recording the podcast, and I was like all into this NPC. It was a super dramatic moment. And they were like, "What's your name?" And I was like, I didn't know. And I had a water bottle next to me, and I was like, Ariki. The name of the water bottle, because I just forgot to name this NPC. It's like key NPC. I just completely forgot.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Yep.
I still do that. Yep. I still forget to name the key NPC.
Virtually all my NPCs, I make up something on the spot. And I got caught in that too, like a couple of weeks. I'm like, why are all these elves, why do they have the same part in all their names, their surnames? This makes no sense. And then I like called myself on it earlier, and I went right back and did it again. but yeah, like, here's the difference, right? I worked it into the story later.
Oh, okay, there you go. Yeah. I need to go back and be like, oh, this is the start of where this water company existed. This is where it started.
Oh, man. Yep.
So we can even learn from our own mistakes and actually use them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So what about it? mostly been talking to the new DM, the person who's like, heard of D&D maybe, or they've seen it played on Critical Role or whatever. Now they want to give it a go. But what about that maybe veteran player at your table who now wants to take their first step to the other side of the screen? Is there any particular, it almost seems like in some ways, you know what to do, but are there things that maybe they won't realize till they get to the other side of the screen? Any advice that you would give that person at your table who is going to be running a game for you now?
It's funny you should mention that. We did things a little different, in my hood. That was like, after running for the same group 5 years straight, I'm just like, Ted, have a seat here. He's like, wait a minute, this is at the head of the table where the DM usually sits. Yep, you're going to do fine, son. So it's like, we kind of like mama bird, baby birded with our group a lot of times for different people. Ted and my brother Ryan were both kind of like that. And it was the 80s. It was rough. It was harsh.
In the hood. In your hood.
Yeah. Well, it was the 80s. The 80s was just a rough time to grow up. We were brutal. Like, we were all assholes, basically, is what it boils down. Just watch any movie from the 80s, right? And you go, I can't believe they talk like that, because you can't talk anywhere near like that, in this day and age. Although I am thinking on this round table, we do need someone from the 70s to have it all covered, right?
We could have it all covered. Yeah. We could have all bases covered. What was the question?
So the experienced player who's now going to be taking the step to DMing. Jim's tired.
Gotcha. Yes. Very good. Very good. Listen, there's no wrong questions in Dungeons and Dragons. Anyway, new DM, longtime player. I think the big one, the advice I would give if it were, and I have, like, right, Pruitt, my co-host on WebDM for, 15 something years, was a player at one of my tables. Like, he's one of the longest people I've played with. And he was like, I got to start DMing. And I was like, well, you should probably not do it the way I do it. Like, you should find your own style, what you like about it. Because there's something about, like, you can, like, sometimes when you're a player, you might think you have an idea of what the DM's got going on because you're watching the game as it's being played and you see sort of the final product, but you might not realize all of the stuff that goes on behind the screen. And so you might be trying to recreate that moment of play and, like, narrowing players' options or taking away their agency or something, because you're like, oh, I got to get this kind of moment. These are the kinds of moments that I like, as opposed to just kind of creating an environment where those moments can arise naturally. And that's a very specific example, but that's the advice I would give, is, like, if you're a longtime player, then, particularly with, like, the same DM, is maybe there's stuff that DM does that you're not going to like when you get behind the screen, and methods that they use that don't work for you. And just knowing that, like, you got the rule stuff down, you're a player, don't sweat it. Now focus on creating, a world that the players can inhabit and characters that they can interact with, and, problems for them to solve and the like, a quest for them to go on, or a story for them to become involved in. And just find your own way forward.
I would say, really, you, as a longtime player, new GM, run the game you want to play, but leave enough room for your players to add to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that kind of sums up what you just said. So
very good. Very good. Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I pretty much say the same thing. It's just something I've definitely noticed, because I definitely would consider myself a long-time player, newer-ish GM, newer-ish. So that's a word. Anyway,
it is now. It is now.
Confirmed.
Like, something I definitely noticed through all the campaigns and all the games I've played is, like, a lot of times what the DM had prepped was way simpler than what, like, the players made it out to be. You know what I mean? Like, the players are, like, sit and theorize and, like, make all these conspiracies, and they'll get way too in their heads about it. And so it's actually not quite as complicated as you as a player made it out to be. So the first time I ever started writing a campaign, I was like, it has to be so complicated. It has to have all these twists, it has to have everything. And now I'm kind of realizing that's not my job. I'll let y'all mess it up for yourselves and make it all twisted. I'm going to write my 3 bullet points in the whole final plot, and y'all will do whatever y'all want. And that's worked out so much better because they've done just that. Like your players will make it complicated enough for themselves. You don't have to make it complicated for them. They'll do it. I promise. It never fails. They'll do it for you.
It never fails. It never fails. Yeah, truth.
Yep.
Tim,
That's great.
Tim Kearney from Absolute Tabletop, he articulated best what I've come to the conclusion years ago. I didn't have a way to articulate it, and it's real simple. As a GM, just come up with problems. That's it. That's all you need to do. Don't solve them. Don't come up with solutions. You know, I had a player. I could tell that this player was a little annoyed with me because there was an encounter, and they were like, the only thing we could do was run away. And I'm like, well, that's a valid solution. Like, I wasn't worried about what you guys did or didn't do. It's up to the party to figure out the solution to the problem. You know, it'll fit into the story in certain ways, and you guys can handle it however you want. And that's what's great about this game. And I just, at this point, just accept that my players are going to come up with stuff I never thought of anyway. So, you know, by not coming up with those solutions, it just leaves me open to whatever they come up with.
Yeah. And I think for me, I was not a flexible DM at first. I kind of had my set plan, and man, just knowing that the players will come up with better ideas than you have sometimes is great advice. Just go with it. Yeah.
It relieves a lot of pressure too, right?
Yeah.
Because they don't even have to the bullseye at that point. They're just gonna get close, right? Be like,
Yeah.
That's worked. That works. The story's still going. You know, you listen to, like, how many times as a DM have I made up this scenario where they needed to roll a certain die roll to move on and progress in the story? It was like the stupidest thing that I could do as a GM, and like that's definitely something that if you're a new GM you can take away. You know, don't be a painter painting yourself in the corner all the time. You know, and you know it goes back to sharing the burden with your players at the table. Let them come up with ideas and help tell the story with you.
Yeah, that's great. So a lot of great questions in the chat. I'm gonna mostly stick to the ones that seem focused on our topic here of new DMs and running the first game. Wayne asked what advice we might have for keeping a group on track. They always seem to kind of be going off, or should we try?
It's a myth. I tell you.
Yeah, here it is. How do I keep my players from going off on some tangent? I want to keep them on track, but also want them to have creativity. So yeah, I mean, it's that balance, right? How much do you push?
I'm confused when they do stay on track. I don't know what to do.
I'm so worried now.
I think it's a control issue a lot of times for GMs because they have a story they're trying to tell. And when the players go in another direction, something in the game has caught their eye and they're gravitating towards it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay to let that happen and for the story to change and for you to not use that other stuff you came up with. I mean, it can still happen. Like it does all the time. Like I had this idea that my players were going to go back to this village to investigate the mystery of like, why were these monsters trying to capture one little kid? Well, they waited months to do it. And then they went back and the village was dead.
Yeah.
Utilize punishments, I think, is a big thing. Like,
it's not about punishment. It's about
consequences.
Yeah. I punish.
In-world consequences.
Sometimes it feels like a punishment.
Yeah. If you don't take the quest, okay, but you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily that. It's like, you know, I don't like to think of my prep as like this like linear thing. I just have a bunch of different things that I can kind of stick wherever they fit. But there are a lot of things that it's like, you know, if your player like goes into the cave and like, you know, you're like, you see that there's probably a trap here. They're like, I want to touch it. Okay, well now you don't have a left hand. I'm sorry, it's gone. There's nothing I can do about it. Like, you know, things like that, or like that's something like with a lot of there was this one moment in one of my campaigns where they were like talking with this Kinku, and he like had one of their friends captive and was baiting them for information, and one girl was like, I'm not going to give it to you, and he just killed her friend like right in front of her, choked him out. And I was like, look what you did. You did that. That happened. Yep. Like, I was not messing around here. Yep. I told you he would kill him if you didn't tell him. So
you know what?
Yeah.
Like kind of like, going off of, the new GM. And first of all, the new GM today is so much better than the GM I was when I started this game. It probably doesn't matter who they are at this point, just because of the resources and information you have at your fingertips. But when I first started running the game, I would write out like modules. I wrote them like they were modules, even though I only used homebrew stuff. And then, kind of like Sid said, is, not writing linear, right? It took me a long time to get to that point, because then eventually, I went away from writing like a module to I would write kind of like flow charts instead. Like, oh, if you do X, then you go here instead. And that really changed the dynamic of the game that we were playing and the stories that we could tell. But it took us years to do that on our own. And then, like, I want to say the amount that our game has progressed and evolved since paying attention to stuff online is immense. And really, for us, that's really recent. It's when we started Nerdarchy. Like, we stayed in our bubble for a long time, and then we kind of like a turtle poking out its head and like, oh, wait a minute, there's all these cool ideas and things that people are doing in their games that we can now steal.
Yeah, that's great. So Lewis Mills asked much earlier, one of the biggest challenges I've found in DMing is the schedule. Any tips for getting a schedule? I'll say that I use Doodle, and I think it was Matt Click from A Fistful of Dice who first showed me that, and I use it all the time now for all kinds of things in life, but especially D&D night, and I hound people, and I just say, fill it out, fill it out, fill it out. Every, hey, it's 3 days later and you still haven't filled it out. And, we need to know when we can game next. And so anyway, that's my tip.
We do the same thing for WonderQuest for recording sessions, which is, playing sessions. We use Doodle. And then this past month, actually, we came up empty. We had no episodes left in the bank, and it was just so busy for everyone because I have finals. And then Allison, one of our players, is like super busy with her job this month. And it's just everybody had a ton of stuff to do. So we actually ended up finding a really cool way to split the party. And we did really unique side quests with all of them that ended up like affecting everything later. So it's like, only one person can record today. Okay, they get a whole episode to themselves because everybody else is busy. So now, like, we ended one episode with them like falling asleep, and then the next episode we got to do this cool side quest where our rogue broke out of the house and went and like roughed up a bunch of people throughout the city. So like, if people can't meet and you want to play with the one person who shows up. Give them their own episode. Give them their own session. That they're going to be there, and you want to play your game.
Yeah, play your game. This is where a setup that's like the traditional classic kind of mega dungeon works really well, especially if there's like a city nearby or a base of some kind, in that every week, whoever shows up, we make a delve into whatever part of the dungeon. And the dungeon can be rich in story and factions and NPCs. It doesn't have to be a sterile combat simulator. But the rule would be, whatever happens in the dungeon, by the end of the session, y'all are out. Because we don't know who can play next, right? Like, our lives are chaotic and we can't always take time off work. And I mean, for years, that was the way I played, was just like, we play with whoever's here, and this is the time that I can run a game. Please show up. And it wasn't until my friends and I got to be in like our mid to late 20s, when we had stable jobs and a stable life, that we could say, all right, every Sunday is game day. That we enjoyed the kind of regularity that a lot of people don't have. But if you have a setup that allows for episodic style gaming, West Marches is one of those. You'll read about it sometimes, where it's like, here's a big open frontier. Whatever you do, go out and fight the hag, go out and kill some trolls, go out and investigate this, whatever it is you do, you're back in town by the end of the session. Then if it's only one player that shows up, then they have an urban adventure in town where they get to do a bunch of fun, cool, carousing stuff or whatever. It's an easy setup, and I personally think making your own mega dungeon is very satisfying. And you can always have that with you. You always have it, and you can always be like, got nothing else to run, let's roll up some characters and do a delve. So that's that'd be something I'd recommend.
Yeah, our long running 5e campaigns for both me and Ted take place out of the same town, and like you said, it was for the first probably like almost 10 levels, they were very episodic, and it was like, oh, no matter what happens, we got to get you back to town before the next session. So whoever you have to play shows up. Like his game is I think the second Saturday of the month, and my game is the third Saturday of the month, and we just play with who's there. We've done superhero games, which they're fun because they can be very episodic by nature. They are. It's like, oh, the threat shows up, who's available, so that that usually works. But what I do find, I feel like the worst thing you can do, especially when you're talking about just gaming, like we all stream games and do things like that, it's a little bit different. But I feel like the worst thing you can do for your gaming group is postpone your game and not game. Because like I've seen so many groups just die that way. Once you miss one session, it's easy to miss two and then three. Just like I play with whoever shows up. My Scarlet Sisterhood game, we've only ever had 3 to 4 players in that game, and sometimes people don't show up still. So, all right, we're running with 2 people this week or 3 people. We just make it work, and you tell different stories, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll also say that I think, if you're just running into like you being the one who is always pushing and you're always available and you're really struggling, that it might be okay if the game dies. It might be okay if it's just not a priority and you move on and you find a new group, and you kind of, I think as you game more, you fine tune your tastes, your commitment level, lots of things, and it's okay if it doesn't work out with certain people. And I've had that, like, my first couple of games were with my wife, and that's not happening again anytime soon.
Or just start a wildly successful Twitch or YouTube channel, and you'll always have a gaming group.
That's true.
That really did help out a lot.
That is true. I mean, but it's a problem that it's not just for new DMs and new groups. I'm trying to get a home group going for the last 6 months, and it's like we've only been able to play 4 or 5 times in that, and the group's still the same size it is, because it's like now we're all in our late 30s, and it's like, shit, nobody has any time to do anything.
I know listening to Jim in the chat going, oh my god, I give my left testicle to play with WebDM.
Oh, I tell them all the time, they don't watch YouTube, they don't do the thing, they have no idea who we are, they're just people I used to work with, and I'm like, yeah, let's play some D&D, and they're like, we should probably watch your channel. I'm like, if you want to, it's no big deal. But it's not just a new player, new DM thing. It's not just young players. It's life is busy, and it's a luxury to set aside 4, 5, 6, however many hours of time you've got, if that. Yeah, it's a problem that's constant. And you just play when you can, play with you can, get online, get a webcam, get a good mic, and do some gaming online. And you don't even need those things really to just play a game. Yeah, there's a lot that's going on. Yeah.
I mean, at this point, I just really like playing online because, like, I move around a lot, like, constantly. I'm never in the same place for a really long time. So, like, setting up a home group is just impossible. But also, like, there's more consistency. There's, there's a better log of what has happened, and you can you have more variety of people to pick from different places. And like you said, like, I had the same thing where, like, no one cares that, like, I do a D&D on the internet. No one cares. Like, one time I was in the computer lab of my school at my university, and someone was watching my Twitch stream, like a VOD, behind me, and I turned around and I was like, oh, hey, and he was like, oh, hey, that cool. Like, that was it. He didn't talk to me at all. And I was like,
Sidception. Okay. It was Sidception.
Like,
that's
no
kind of
one
awesome.
Cares. So yeah, whatever. I like being online so people, like, at least know who I am.
Yes. Yep. Agreed. And the chat's always fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think my players watch my videos. I think most of my players don't watch my videos. I'll say that.
That's fine.
Yep.
I talk about them. I don't want them to watch those videos.
No, exactly. That's the thing. I will once in a while not do a video because I'm like, ooh, maybe I shouldn't do a here's how you prep for a game on Thursday night when my game is Saturday.
Right. Yeah.
Cool. So last question, how, in terms of, there was a question about how lethal should my adventures be? And I guess that's a question we can talk about real quick. For the new DM, I think that's a biggie, is like balance. How do I balance? Do I balance my encounters? And how does this all work? How do I make sure that I'm not going to obliterate everyone?
Well, as to how lethal your games are, I like prison rules. You just kill one right off the bat, just to say, no, you're not messing around.
So no, just first session.
You can't see it under Dave's glasses, but he has like 2 teardrops under his.
Yes.
Your game should be as lethal as you want it to be, or as you need it to be. To me, it doesn't really matter that much. Like, I roll all my dice in the open. I don't really fudge rolls anymore, or not really. I don't fudge rolls anymore. Whatever happens. And it's like, your character might die and you get to roll up a new one. No biggie.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I as a player, I like a high degree of lethality because knowing that my character could die if they're stupid or I do something foolish or not think things through, raises the stakes of the game for me, and I enjoy that. I know a lot of players get very attached to their characters, and so when one of them dies, they take it pretty hard. Death isn't the end. This is Dungeons and Dragons, right? Like beyond just the spells to bring characters back, there's questing into the underworld to bring their soul. There's finding their reincarnated soul in somewhere. There's finding a dead relative. I always love the old school rule of like, my cousin shows up and I willed him all my stuff, kind of like, and it's just like Bob 2.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty generous in your group, because in our that stuff was divided up before the body hit the ground.
Oh no, we had wills and contracts. So I when I run a game, this is going to sound like the wishy-washiest kumbaya answer. It is as lethal as the situation needs it to be. And so that means if the players do something silly, like first level, go running up in a big ogre's lair and just start making a big mess of the place, then that ogre's probably going to smear a couple of them across the walls before they get out of there. If they go at a lower level and they take their time, they're patient, they scout the area, they find the best way through, they try to get to know their enemy, then they'll probably have a significant advantage. And when combat does happen, they've done a lot of the work ahead of time, and so it might be a cakewalk. I just don't pull punches, and like Dave, I roll in the open. I'm not the most tactical minded of people, so a lot of times I forget like monster abilities are the best way to use them. But if it's a fight that I want to be memorable, like a dragon fight or a big demon or something, then I'll take the time to like look and see what the best course of action is. And if I mean for it to be a deadly fight, like really lethal, then I'll pull no punches, kill a downed character. Don't make them roll death saves, just stomp on them once. But it's not every time, right? Not every enemy's doing that. It's appropriate to the monster that I'm playing or the NPC that I'm playing. So that's kind of how I run.
Yeah. See, I'm all for I'm all for killing a great I love a good kill. I love it. Shower me in blood. I'm all about it. But I find that a little bit more difficult in especially what I'm doing right now. My best example is the podcast that I'm running, WonderQuest. We've got character art. We've got the whole brand is about these characters. So I'm not super gung-ho to murder all of them. And so what I usually do, instead of being like, if you do this, you're going to die, I something that Will told me when I first started GMing, and he was helping me figure it all out, was the most boring thing you could do to a person's character is kill them. And I was like, okay, I'll let that sink in. And so I try really hard to come up with something that's a little bit more creative, because I don't want them to die. I know that I do not want these characters to die. I built this whole campaign around these people, I really don't want them to be dead, but I don't want them to get off scot-free. So that's why, like, if any of you follow WonderQuest or anything, if you haven't listened to it yet, a lot of the responses are like, oh my God, this is so sad. Like, this is such a gut punch. And I'm like, yeah, I know, because I can't kill them, but I'll make them suffer. Like,
It really is.
I know.
Yeah.
It also gets a little more complicated when you've just commissioned character art, right, guys?
Yeah. Well, this is gaming on stream is a whole different thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
We did lose a whole batch of art that way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I remember this.
But maybe the player commissioned their own private character art because they love a character so much,
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. There's light at the end of the tunnel. And if you have a player who's like really upset about their character dying, and I agree with Will, it is one of the more boring things you can do to a character. You can take away their things that they care about. You can mess with the connections they have in the world. There's a lot of things you can do. Then there's a way for them to come back, and then that becomes part of their entire character's story as expressed through the game. Like, go rescue them from the underworld. Go face down death and bring your friend back. And in the meantime, they get to play another character. And, then it's, I never saw death of my characters as a bad thing because I always had another character I was ready to play. And
Yep.
Far worse for something your character's soul could be trapped, and that's it. You can't resurrect them from the dead. You can't go find them. They could be obliterated by Black Razor and as if they never existed. There's a lot of fates worse than death in D&D.
I've had my fair share of character deaths over the years as a player and for my players, but yeah, you're absolutely right when you say that's the easiest thing you can do to them. It is so much more fun to twist, and there's been times that I've like let them escape death just so I can do horrible things to them, and like, oh great, now there's this cool taint mechanic in a Dragon magazine I want to put into my game. And for you kids at home that don't know what Dragon magazine, once upon a time we would get stuff in the mail.
It's an app now, Dave.
Yeah,
I do miss the paper magazines, though. I like I said, I'm an analog guy. But I'd like to clarify, like, the reason we keep saying that death is boring for a character or for your characters is because you're the dungeon master. If you want to kill the characters, there's nothing stopping you. You can throw the baddest monster you can think of and double everything about it, double the hit points, double the damage, whatever you want to do. There's nothing stopping you. And so once you realize that, I saw in the chat, someone was like, also power gamers. The same thing. You got a power gamer, then there's no restraint on a DM's power within the game. They can put whatever they want in there. You can come across whatever they want. The players are limited by their characters and those kinds of things. So it can seem intimidating. You're like, oh my God, how am I going to balance these combats out? What am I going to do if a character accidentally dies? Accidental death's another thing. And it's well within the DM's right to go, I didn't mean to accidentally kill you. Your character's severely injured, unconscious, but barely alive. That's a legitimate outcome. But just you have so many resources. The Dungeon Master has so many resources at their disposal that it's far more interesting to think of ways to mess with the characters in ways that don't involve their demise. And like, how can I really, and it requires players who are into the campaign and create characters with connections to the setting and those kinds of things. But even murder hobos like their gold and magic items, and even they care about something, and you can take it away from them, and that's a fun time.
Yeah,
it's always about what progresses the story, right? And like one of Ted's early character deaths, I think it was like his second character death. The first one was great because like he almost cried, but the second one was I described the scene where there's this hulking 10-foot humanoid crashing through the brush, and it was like running from something, and they hadn't fought anything all night, and they wanted to fight, so they attacked it, and it was a stone giant, and they were like 3rd level in AD&D, and it just punted him into a tree and shattered him.
Oh my god.
And like he could have just been dead, but instead, like the other players brought him to an NPC that was this druid that was, of the same deity as him, and they did this ritual, and his we messed with his stats for dying because that's what we did back then. He gained like a point of charisma or wisdom, but lost some constitution, and he came back a little more enlightened, and he had this like deeper connection with his god, and in this NPC, and his not only did the character end up a little bit wiser, so did the player, because it changed a little bit like how he interacted with the world.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I look at character death as a chance to tell a really good story if it's done right, and I enjoy playing different characters, so yeah, I'm always ready to I'll roll up a new character, and I love a good epic death, or even just a gruesome death. Just it can make a good story. I will say, if people want to, if you're gonna make your encounters deadly, make them deadly with intent, and don't just open the monster manual and throw them. I mean, have some understanding if you're a new player of like the challenge rating system or whatever. Or there's great encounter builder things out there on like Donjon or Goblinist. I think they have like you can put in, I'm in a swamp and I want some monsters for my level 4 adventurers. There's 5 of them, and it'll give you some possibilities. And so there's really handy tools out there if you want to try to get them balanced as much as balanced.
Oh yeah, we're getting into the appropriate challenge for the appropriate character level.
Yeah,
Kobold Fight Club can be a useful tool as well. I tell everyone in our videos, the CR system as it exists in 5th edition is a guideline. It is not ironclad.
Yeah.
Nor is it good.
Right, but nor is it particularly good past a certain level.
It's more like art than science.
But if you've got nothing else, if you're just starting off and you've got no other frame of reference, it works. Just know that eventually, as you get more comfortable with the system and as your characters get more badass, you'll need to skew towards deadly, probably. And then eventually you just throw it out the window and be like, listen, there's a giant in this cave. If you go here at 1st level, you're going to find a giant. If you go here at 20th level, you'll find a giant.
Right.
And treat it like that.
The world is a dangerous place. And
the world's a dangerous place. It's Dungeons and Dragons. Come on, it's full of monsters. And it sucked to live there.
Yeah. And that makes it more exciting. Like you said, like you prefer a pretty deadly high level of lethality. I do too, because it's exciting.
Yeah, that's why I like Warhammer, because you could lose a limb or an eye or your mind, and that's just the way it rolls.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we better wrap things up here, guys, but I want to thank you once again so much for joining me. It's tons of good questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to very many, but thank you all 86 of you right now who are tuning in. That's really awesome. And this sort of thing will be happening again. I hope to do them once a month. So the next one I'm looking at is probably going to be May 28th. And, I'll probably get some new DMs in the mix, but definitely hope to have the 3 of you rotated back in at some point, because I hope to keep these going. Thank you for joining.
That sounds great.
This stuff's always fun, and it goes by so fast.
It always does.
Mm-hmm.
It always does.
So I'll say once again, go check out their links in the video description if you want to follow Sydney, Jim, and Dave. Do you guys have any other thing you want to plug before we sign off here?
Always. Nerdarchy is putting together our first Kickstarter, and it's based off of our out-of-the-box encounters that we do over on the website. But Mike Gould does an awesome job writing these. We want to take them, and we're going to put art to them and maps, and we're partnering up with Arknight, who do the flat plastic minis. So we're going to have minis and the flat clear maps to go along with it. Matt Mercer was nice enough to write a forward for us. We're really excited about this, and it's going to be a lot of fun to do. So probably the next 60, 90 days, we're probably going to launch this. So you go find our newsletter. It's on our website and pretty much in all of our videos if you want to stay tuned in for that. That's all I got.
Yeah. Anyone else?
So WebDM, of course, we've got our YouTube channel. We launched a second YouTube channel to specifically archive our live plays that we do on Twitch. We understand not everybody's into live streaming games, and we didn't want to mix up the two channels. So we've got that. We of course have a Twitch channel, Patreon, that kind of good stuff. That's kind of it for us right now. We're in a bit of a consolidation phase, just like slow things down a bit. But we are all over the place, and if it's possible, if you love WebDM, it's possible to get us 5 days a week in some form or fashion. So check us out if you like that, as well as my esteemed co-hosts and co-panelists.
Yeah. So I'm Sydney. You can follow me, my personal stuff, pretty much everywhere: Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, all those things at Sydniac, SYDNIAC. That's like more of my personal D&D adventures and things like that. And then on top of that, you can follow at Encounter RP, which is more D&D professional stuff, and twitch.tv/encounter roleplay. And as I said earlier, I'm on the D&D channel, twitch.tv/D&D, every Saturday. And the podcast I'm the dungeon master of is WonderQuest. It's at WonderQuest Pod, Wonder with an A, on Twitter. And then I play in a podcast called Turncloaks, which you can follow on Twitter at TurncloaksPod. Yes.
Awesome. Yeah. You guys are busy people.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Awesome.
D&D life.
I will say one more thing, and that is I'm hoping we got into a little bit of a kind of, it's hard to separate new player stuff too. You know, how do you handle new players coming to the table? And there were a lot of good questions that I didn't get to on that stuff. So I do hope
there's a lot of good questions in the chat.
Yeah, I do hope to do a panel on that as well. I think probably next time maybe I'll do something that's a little less beginner friendly on May 28th, but maybe the next one after that, it would be good to get one on how do you considerations for introducing new players to the game. But yeah, if you all have suggestions for the next one, feel free to leave those in the comments or in the chat. I'm always open to suggestions for topics of discussion that you want to hear great DMs out there talk about. So Dave, Jim, Sydney, thank you again so much. It's been awesome talking to you guys, and I really appreciate it. And yeah, we're going to sign off here. Everybody take care. You'll see us again around.
Thanks for having
us
on.
on.
Thank you.